when this theme was first raised, you may not be aware, but Eleanor, John and myself have more or less weekly Zoom meetings as our executive committee and discuss a whole range of things. And this topic has come up, of course, for many people. And we've had lively debates about it too. So when I propose it a little bit provocatively as the great debate. Let's sort this. Let's get the protagonists in the ring and deal with this. Of course, anyone who's serious about the questions will soon find that that's not a viable approach and not necessarily a helpful approach either. So what we did think, yes, it would be good to have two people bring forward the issues and so on. So David's kindly volunteered to be to develop and prepare the job guarantee part of it. So I will just take us through a few slides. I can't promise to do what John was suggesting, that we will solve the issues or answer all the questions. But the point I want to make at the beginning is that where we start from, how we embark on this journey can to some extent determine the route we take. So we'll see how that goes. So there we go. What's it to be? My first picture is just to imagine we have the whole of the planet, so to speak, and we have human activity via the factory, and money moves in, products come out, and we all line up, and what will our share be? So, who gets the claim? How much? On what basis? That's my starting question. And I will put forward what I think, and this may well be further clarified, three principal arguments, I call them. And I'll start with the first one I call the justice argument. And if you look into the questions of what's fair, what's right, what's just, I put together a few quotes, and many start with the Bible. And you can see the first one is a bit of an Old Testament type thing. You will sweat for your living, so to speak, and then you'll turn back, then you'll be handed back. Another one, if you're not willing to work, nothing for you, mate. I was going to take out the Lord Jesus Christ bit, but anyway, you get the gist of it. This is to say, that's how you warrant support, by applying your effort. And then it goes further, but then of course, older cultures, they didn't just condemn the people who had a bad harvest or had other impediments. There was a community approach, and this was one of the statements that people would get what they need. So in spite of everything else, there's a bit of a moral thing, but also a yes, but we are, after all, in the same community. And then more recently, so this is from the early Americas, where a so-called Guildford Covenant was agreed, that people in that particular settlement, they would apply themselves to the common work, and they would receive from the common results, if you like, the produce, what they each required. So if you had a big family, you'll no doubt get more, and so on. So it's a way of thinking. And we know the one that's popularised by Karl Marx, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. He wasn't the inventor of that statement, but it's well known in association with his, what would you call it, his idealism about the communist future. And then the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights has this statement, that everyone has a right to a standard of living for their health, well-being, family, food, clothing, housing, medical, etc. So a pretty broad, sweeping declaration of rights. The extent to which they're met, of course, we know it's pretty mixed, and mostly less. But that was a kind of expression of, you might say, if we could, this is how we'd like to be. It's a value statement. So that's that. And you can see it's mixed. Now, what I call the economic argument, I'm not sure it's the right title, but this inflation question is a big one that comes up. Yeah, but what will happen if you suddenly hand out entitlement tokens, as I call them, to people. Well, they'll all rush to the shelves and the prices will go up. Too much demand, not enough stuff. So I go into this question, what is this thing we call inflation? And I, and most of you, may have the good fortune that you don't have to behave like an economist or think like an economist, because economists or people trained academically will need to present, if you like, an academic type argument. I don't have to, and I'm very happy for that. So the question is, what is this thing we call inflation? Well, there's a definition. It's kind of the average increase in prices over time, and average, we bundle together a whole range of things we think are sort of general interest, and there's the basket. It's got flights in it, it's got all sorts of stuff, sofas, food, whatever. And the people who compile the statistics, they've got presumably a rule book, so pile all this stuff in, evaluate the change from last month to this month, and we'll put it all together and come up with an answer. So my little, just to make that obvious, that's 5% increase. It's all gone up, on average, 5%. Okay, that's a familiar concept, this basket of goods thing. Knowing that, of course, some people are more affected. But if all veggies go up, let's say, that will affect a lot more people than, say, if flights go up, which will affect some, but not everybody equally. So that's the inflation thing. Now, question, how does it work? And I've put it in that frame, who actually raises the price? And I'm going to propose three theories. Number one, there we go, and I'm using petrol prices in South Australia because it's a peculiar cultural, what would you call it, sort of a habit, not only in South Australia, but certainly in South Australia, not every state, that we like the prices to go up and down constantly, keep us on our toes, get us excited when it's low, and get us frustrated when it's just gone up before we went to get petrol. So, theory one, God puts the prices up, right? This is how it happens, you see. God turns up and the prices change. Now, this doesn't sound, because we're modern people, we think, oh, come on, don't be daft. How can God put the prices up? We know it generally happens when you're not watching, so you can't be sure, but mostly we scoff at such an idea that, God does it. Theory two, the invisible hand does it. Ah, that hand we can't see that economists have discovered? Well, let's watch it do it. So the invisible hand comes along, and the prices go up. How does the invisible hand know, how to change them, what to do? Well, fortunately for us, we've devised a whole lot of theories. And this is the kind of stuff that will go into it. You'll know the first bit, price, function of supply, demand, and then a whole lot of other stuff. Because what you'll find is that when you hear supply and demand, well, I go to a market every week. When the available carrots get less and less, and the queue remains the same, the price hasn't changed. So, that theory didn't apply then. It came to my mind when I asked the vegetable seller, what's the price of your carrots now? The answer sticks in their throats as they say what it always is, $4.80. And why does it stick? Because they haven't decided, I'll change it. Hence, it's called sticky. Economists call this sticky. Things aren't so fluid that the market automatically, washes through and everything adjusts. No, it's sticky. And then whatever else happens. And you can imagine all the excuses you could make for a price going up, not going up, because of this, because of that, etc. So that's the invisible hand, and its sophisticated formula. Last one is This is, of course, the anybody person. Anne, that's Anne, or Jim, of course, or you, or I change the prices. A human being does it. And watch how she does it. She gets onto her pricing computer and whoops, changes the numbers. I remember asking someone at a petrol station how they get, when do the numbers, the prices change? And the guy said, they get a message from New Zealand, for some reason, saying, it's now going to be this, it's now going to be that. So, okay. And now someone in New Zealand, he presumably, or she, gets a message from someone else, change it, up, down, whatever. It could be an algorithm, it could be a formula, but that's been, of course, put in place by a person. So however it happens, someone does it. Someone changes the number. And the important part about this, and this is a kind of challenge to economic orthodoxy, is that there are always people involved. So it's not like we agreed it wouldn't be God, that's ridiculous. Invisible hand, questionable.
Almost ridiculous.
A person? Yeah, a person, okay, but why do they do it is the question we will follow on with. So it's always a person or people, but why would Anne, Jim, you or me put up prices? Of course, could put them down, but why would we make a change? Okay, so now if you think of yourself as a supplier of, let's say, vegetables, it's easier to think some things in the, let's say, the primary market. So you've got a bad season. You're only getting half the carrots that you expected to get, but your children still need school, you've got to pay your electricity, your other living costs haven't changed much. You've got to make your livelihood out of half the amount of carrots. Hence, a good motive to put the price up, as an example. So that's just a simple example. It could be that. Costs of good have gone up, so it's a bit similar. You've got more costs to cover with the same amount of stuff. You're expecting costs to go up. Could be, I'm anticipating trouble. Better quickly get a bit more money in. Everyone else is doing it. What the hell? I can join in. Or you just want more. I'm in a good position and say, well, sorry, $10 this time. You want carrots? $10. Now, of course, there's complex, both additional possibilities or mixes of things. My point is, people decide. What motivates them can be complicated. It can be very obvious. And I was just thinking on the way here, when you see the beer tent and it says all beer half price, and you've got the people turning up at the beer festival or whatever, where are they going to go? Oh, half price. Of course they will. That's kind of obvious. Why? Because why would you spend more when you can get the same for less? So we can be a bit predictive about that. Then when the sign goes up, beer half price, made from imported goods produced by sweat labour, then people might think, I don't know. There might be a bit more nuanced how they respond, and so on. So you can see that how we act depends on a number of factors, and usually it's complicated. The difficulty for many of us today is that we can't see through the economic system. So when it says half-price T-shirt, you think, whoopee! You don't think about the person who can't feed their kids because they're sewing this shirt for 5 cents or whatever. So anyway, people do it. That's the point there. Where are we going to next? Yes. Now, I should mention one thing, that some things go up in price, and we all get it, whoopee, shares, stocks, consequently super funds, you've got an increase. Why have you got it? Because people have been speculating. That's not inflation. Now, we know, of course, the tons of money that's poured into society recently, a lot of it has pushed up the stock market. So we don't call that inflation because it's kind of a goodie. We like that. Whereas the other stuff we call inflation. Of course, they interlink. But this is what I discovered. They're called investments. Of course, if you want to jump in and buy shares now, you might find the price inflated from a previous thing. I should have got them last week. but we don't think of it as bad. Just a choice, I guess. We don't include land. So land prices going up is not inflation. House price going up, meaning the bricks and mortar, the stuff, building costs, is counted in inflation. Something to think about. So, now, last thing, and that one popped up a bit early. A last sort of argument, and I'm calling it human dignity, social purpose. Those words just popped in. But you'll see some others in a minute, so that's just an error on my part. So this is Oscar Wilde, our great friend and genius. Work is the refuge of people who have nothing better to do. And we've got a bit of sympathy for that. So yes, who wants to be a bloody drone, you know? Anyway, he was a smart guy, so he's saying there's something else that we should be more concerned with than work. There'll be a few others that just popped up without me being able to do it. So there's a similar thing. Perhaps it's too difficult to think nobly when one thinks only of earning a living. A bit like where we should be is actually not at the press or at the machine. We should be, our sights should be somewhere else. That's what these people were saying in the last one here. The goal of the future is full unemployment, so we can play. Again, it's slightly provocative, but you can see, well, actually, yeah, maybe playing is better than working. Maybe it's more, is it, depending on what sort of play. If you think of Schiller, play for him was a kind of noble pursuit. It's not dominoes, it's something else. Anyway, what it's all about. Two views I'm suggesting. Income is understood primarily as a reward for the contribution someone makes. You're remunerated or compensated for your effort, for what well, I've worked so bloody hard, I deserve it. That's why I got my nest egg. I worked all my life, and it's very common. Especially that I've worked all my life, and now I've been ripped off, or so I've kind of deserving. When we hear I've paid taxes all my life, I'm therefore worthy of whatever the pension or the superannuation is. Whereas if you haven't paid taxes, that's the corollary, isn't it? Well, you slipped in. Freeloader. So that's one kind of position. And we see it appeals to this, well, that's why people do stuff, because they're getting reward, they're getting recognition, did all this. I didn't do it for nothing, and I got that acclaim, that validation. I think we can all see ourselves there to some extent. Fair enough. He worked for it. He deserves it, or she. And then the other one of entitlement. It says, well, whether you've been a great contributor, a capable participant in the economic process, or not, through injury, disability, weakness, whatever. The income as entitlement, which of course is the universal basic income thesis, if you like, says no, we're not going to say you only become worthy after you've done your 10 yards. You're worthy, deserving, right from the beginning. And again, I think we can see there are many people who just do things because they think they want to do them. It's good to do them. They like to do them. They like to know that what they're doing is helping people, regardless of let's say, the claim they might otherwise demand. Well, I've been so good to you, how about handing something back? It does appeal, of course, to something that we know, and I think we'll all understand this, when you give a present at Christmas or whatever, or someone else gives you a present, and you didn't give them a present of similar value, or you forgot one year. Well, I've been giving you gifts for, what about, and you think, well, hang on, it was a gift. But often our gifts have little strings attached that we didn't acknowledge. So gifting is not, we might think, oh, well, I'm so noble, I give. But somewhere hidden is often a thing, and now I'm owed. Something you owe me back. So this is kind of appealing to something that's not always with us so easily. We want to be noble, but then you're taking advantage, you know, and so we start to say, well, okay, first sweep up, then we'll talk about what you're getting for lunch. So that's...
I think I want to suggest a third one, and that is income is the entitlement for the owners of capital.
Well, I mean, that gets complicated, of course, but that's a social thing. That's about the rules of the game, of course. On what basis can you extract income from others or from society as a whole? So, in conclusion, or my conclusion at this stage, I point to the fact, that when we say economics, and you know, there's a big argument: is it a science? Is it just fantasy? Whatever. There are good reasons for attributing, let's say, scientific, the method, that there's method, that it's not just random, any old story, but to what extent it can claim scientific rigour, that becomes a big debate. But a lot of effort is put into trying to, so-called finesse the topics, find rules, patterns, etc. So that's... A theoretical science is one where you're just kind of an outsider looking on, and you're looking for the laws, the rules that apply, so you can predict stuff. And a practical science is a way of describing something that is about changing human behaviour. So it's more like ethics would be a sort of practical science, and physics and whatever would be a theoretical science. And economics kind of comes in between the two, because we know that when the prediction's made, people start behaving differently. And that's the whole problem for economists. People change their behaviour when they hear what the economist says. And a lot of economic predictions are made in order to manipulate the behaviour. So it's a tricky area. So how would, and of course a big question about universal basic income, well, what will people do if they suddenly got an allowance, or whatever you want to call it, that they could, you know, meet their basic needs from? How would it change them? So, question, would they become lazy? Well, some may. Would anyone here become lazy? Of course not. But you know, we might say, oh, sorry, I'm not going to get up this morning, I'll leave it a bit later, because I can still go shopping. So, you know, it will affect us differentially. And of course that might change over time. If you've been lazy for 6 weeks, you're getting fed up with being lazy. You know, something else might kick in. Would they become more creative? The stress of having to do what Rousseau, you know, or whichever one of those, you know, just work, do the drudgery just to survive. When that's lifted from you, you can start being kind with your kids, you can do things you'd really like to do because you've got a bit of free air, so to speak. This is almost the last slide. So, would they become more creative? Well, question mark. Would you? Would they become more generous? Oh, well, I'm taken care of. I don't need to see the world as my constantly trying to crush me. I can now set my sights a bit wider, think about others, etc. And how would it affect you? And I think that's the important question, because we make lots of theories about other people, about society, about the rest of them. And I think it's always important to say, yeah, it may or may not happen, but what would I do? And how would I change if other people also changed? And I'm not suggesting you answer that, but you can just keep the question. So, what would happen? And I've put this great guy, John Kenneth Galbraith, rightly points out that predictions are really dangerous in social science. And there's a good reason for that, as I've alluded to. And he's a wit, of course. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we say, oh, well, this will be the result, that'll be the result. Well, yes, maybe. But it's not always so black and white, as I'll call it. So that's that. And then I've put a picture of people together, and I'm not sure these are 4 distinct zones, but I put them as just a a map, and I would have liked to actually add to this picture all the kinds of pursuits that we as human beings get up to, that we enjoy, value, whatever. So AFL could be in the corner, you know, you could have Mozart somewhere, whatever. You know, you could have all these human endeavours that we say make us rich and engaged and so on, that we say, well, actually, when it comes down to it, it's not the machine work that I'm really here for, it's these other things. So that concludes my story. Actually, I don't want to mention one other thing, just while I think of it. The issue of prices changing. We'll all remember when everybody suddenly realised they need toilet rolls.
Yeah.
Now, you go, and most of us might have gone into a supermarket and say, oh, I'll just grab a couple. First of all, you discovered that you could only grab a couple. You couldn't just say, I'll take the shelf, just in case. And also, prices had hardly moved. So the response of the over-demand was not suddenly all the prices shoot up, that'll sort you lot out, and only the rich can go to the toilet, but actually society via the supermarket empire says, right, 2, that's all you're getting, finished. Now, of course, you could sneak in around the back, send the kids in, get more, but it wasn't a price response, it was simply a rule type response. And of course, governments can do that, they can say you can't have more, ration. And lots of things that society does, either through corporate power or social power, public power, are to regulate how things might be accessible to us. One thing I realised when we think this all through, our economic system is run by the suppliers. We're just, what would you call it? We're not quite fodder because we're doing the eating, but basically the supplier pushes things onto us. I mean, we don't have to accept, but if you want it, you're going to accept it. It was interesting just now, the EU's discussing compelling Apple to provide the same power supply to their phones as a whole range of others, particular C, whatever it's called, saying this is so wasteful, this is so daft to have all this extra stuff going around, we're just going to make a rule. Now, I thought, yeah, of course, part of us may feel, how dare they tell the market what to do? But actually, it's been Apple telling the market what to do, or Android, or any of them for that matter. It hasn't been the consumer. And that, I think, is a bit of a hallmark of our current situation, that we're both manipulated, this, that, and the other, by powers that we can't really penetrate. But we're getting beyond my thing, so we need to hear from David.